Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Following the emergency electricity grid alert over the weekend, we chat with Alberta's utilities minister about what went wrong. A number of pipe bursts in Lethbridge has caused major problems, including for those at a school and at an indoor soccer facility. And an alleged plot by Hamas to expand their attacks throughout North America, Europe, and Asia was recently thwarted. Foreign Affairs expert Lisa Daftari will explain.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The nasty cold temperatures we received over the weekend caused major issues with our electricity grid to the point where the Alberta Electricity System Operator issued emergency alerts on Saturday. Albertans were asked to turn off unnecessary lights, not use their stoves, instead use a microwave, unplug their electric vehicles, and not to plug in their block heaters. We ended up avoiding rolling brownouts thanks to Saskatchewan helping us out. Alberta's Utilities Minister Nathan Neudorf joins us now from Edmonton to talk about what transpired on Saturday. Nathan, how do we reach this point here in the province?
Not only did we have no wind and no solar as part of the winter realities, but we had an amazing large storm front that impacted BC, Saskatchewan, Montana, whom we normally rely on for surplus generation, and they were not able to supply what they would have liked to. Saskatchewan did come through in a big way and maximize what they could send us. We also had 2 thermal generators go offline due to the cold and mechanical issues caused by the cold. So we were put in a position where we were very close to that threshold where we might have had to have roving brownouts, and we asked Albertans if they could help us out by reducing their consumption, and they came through in a really big way. Within a minute, they removed about 100 megawatts of load from our system, and minutes after that, an additional 100 megawatts came off, which really saved the day, and we're very, very grateful to Albertans for all that they did.
Now, Nathan, Albertans were asked to turn off the lights and unplug, yet we saw many images on social media of skyscrapers in both Calgary and Edmonton all lit up on a Saturday night.
That's something that we continue to work on. We did put out our request broadly to everyone, and we are working with businesses and commercial entities. Obviously, there could be multiple ownership, there could be emergency lighting, different things like that that are wired into those buildings. It's identified as an area needing improvement, and we've reached out to as many as we can to ask for their additional cooperation should we ever face that same situation again.
So can you really explain how it came to be that Saskatchewan came to our rescue?
Well, Saskatchewan has a little bit additional resources at their disposal in terms of coal-fired and natural gas-fired generation, and they were able to maximize what they could send us for that time frame, and we're very, very grateful to them. Unfortunately, our system right now only has a very small intertie with Saskatchewan, and 153 megawatts is the full and maximum value that we can put through that line. This is something that we're identifying through our internal inquiries, and we look forward to rectifying that in the future.
You know, many people would argue this is a prime example of why we should not put all of our eggs in the renewable energy basket, relying solely on wind power and solar power, and that natural gas and coal-generated electricity is still needed. Now, that's a point that Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe recently brought up.
Absolutely. Renewables have an incredible piece to play. They are zero emitting and low cost, so they have great attributes. Unfortunately, there are times in the year where there are other negative attributes that they are not dispatchable. We can't make the wind blow, and in winter when the sun sets early before peak times, we can't rely on them at those times. So we need to maximize their good benefits, and we need to find a mitigation strategy to compensate when they aren't able to produce for the grid.
Yeah, so how can we really avoid a potential electricity grid emergency like we experienced over the weekend in the future? What is the plan moving forward?
Well, that's what our inquiries, we saw this potential way back in August, which is why we began multiple inquiries into our system to say, how do we manage the growing electrification of our grid? How do we balance the generation attributes of multiple possibilities? And how do we make our system more efficient, optimize what we have, right from generation through transmission and distribution, so that we have the reliability, sustainability, and affordability that Albertans have come to expect from their grid. And we look forward to those inquiries being wrapped up in the next month and a half, and setting out that vision for all Albertans so that we can hopefully not face these kind of situations again next winter.
Alberta Affordability and Utilities Minister Nathan Neudorf, thanks so much for your time today. By the way, Alberta's opposition NDP says that Minister Neudorf needs to take action on increasing grid reliability following the 4 grid alerts over the weekend. Capital Power Corporation and Ontario Power Generation have signed a deal to assess the development of small modular nuclear reactors here in Alberta. The companies say they will complete the feasibility assessment within a couple of years. Officials of Capital Power say the deployment of SMR technology will provide an important source of power in Alberta for the future. The construction of the first of 4 SMRs will be completed by the end of 2028 and expected to be online by the year 2029. As the prairies continue to battle the extreme cold weather, debate is heating up over our province's electricity grid. Alberta Premier Daniel Smith and Saskatchewan Scott Moe are taking Ottawa to task over its green energy plan, saying that renewables cannot be depended on when the temperatures plunge. A spokesperson for Federal Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault says Ottawa has always said that reliability, along with affordability, is one of the driving forces behind how the regulations will be designed. Officials said this is why the federal government is making provisions so that fossil fuel burning plants can run without carbon capture technologies during peak usage and emergency situations. You know, like Alberta, most of Manitoba has been under an extreme cold weather warning, with temperatures falling below -40 with wind chill values. Environment Canada says an Arctic air mass continues to bring dangerously cold temperatures to much of the province. It expects the extreme cold warning will remain in effect for a good portion of southwestern Manitoba this evening. Well, the extreme cold warning continued for our region as well in Lethbridge today. As we just mentioned, this polar vortex has put quite the strain on our electricity grid. Officials are asking Albertans to conserve energy between the peak hours of 4 and 7 p.m. Jeanette Rocher is in now with a quick peek at the forecast. Jeanette, fortunately, the mercury should be climbing a little soon, but more snow is also on the way.
Well, it is hell, but we are also looking at more seasonable temperatures this weekend. It is all set to begin on Tuesday. So look at that. We're looking at a high of -9 for Tuesday. Wow, that's going to feel balmy. We're also expecting some periods of light snow as well to begin around noon, and that's supposed to last right through until Wednesday night. Now, as we get closer into the weekend, that's when we're going to see those plus temperatures as well. So I'll be back later in the show to tell you all about that.
Great, thanks so much, Jeanette. But you know, the bitterly cold temperatures we've been experiencing lately has really had a big impact in our city. City crews were out working on various pipes that burst in residential neighborhoods. There was also a pipe that burst at Chinook High School, closing it for the day. The rest of the schools in the public school division were open, but buses were not running. Schools within the Holy Spirit Catholic School Division in our city were open today, except for Father Leonard Van Tegum due to a flooding incident. The Service Sports Center was also closed today to the public due to a ruptured water pipe inside of the building. And due to a sanitary leak at City Hall, water was shut off and the building was closed to both the staff and public. Repairs and cleanup are expected to wrap up by Tuesday afternoon. Between the extreme cold weather, the shorter days, and the hustle and bustle over the holidays finally being over, you know, it's kind of easy to feel a little bit depressed. And if you did feel a little blue today, you're not alone. Today is considered Blue Monday, which generally falls on the 3rd Monday of January. As BCN's Jeanette Rocher reports now, Lethbridge College found a clever way to beat the blues with the help of some furry little friends.
All it took was some warm fur and the wiggle of some little noses to bring a smile to an otherwise cold January day. A day that happens to be Blue Monday. And who was this little guy?
This is Johnny Cash. So it's kind of like, it's said to be one of the most stressed and like most depressing days of the year, because the days are short and it's dark and it's cold, freezing outside. So it gets a little depressing when everyone has to stay in, and for that we've got bunnies.
So we are Archie's Angels Rabbit Rescue. We are local here in Lethbridge. We rescue mainly rabbits. We just opened our doors to kind of all exotics. And yeah, and we're here today to help students with mental health.
You need something soft, cuddly to relax, to just burn out that stress. So buddies are for that, for students who are stressed and a little bit, especially the international students too, who come from far away home. They're here and then they are not aware about the weather and everything. It's just new to them. Everything's so new. So yeah, a little stress out.
We know what it's like to struggle with our mental health because rescue fatigue is very real, and not a lot of people know that, you know, animal associates like veterinarians, vet techs even, you know, they really struggle with their mental health.
Not to mention students who are in the thick of their studies. Some of them were surprised to see the bunnies,
Yeah, it's surprised, so cute, and I love bunny.
while others couldn't wait.
Oh my gosh, I loved it. I specifically put it on my calendar, so I was like, I can't miss it. I have to go. Because I feel like I never get to see cute little things.
And if you don't have a fur ball to pet, other ways to combat Blue Monday, according to the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, capitalize on the natural light. Natural light helps stabilize serotonin and triggers endorphins, the mood-boosting hormones. So get outside for at least 10 minutes a day. Exercise will also leave you feeling calmer and happier. Smile. It releases a cascade of feel-good chemicals in your brain. This can actually lower your blood pressure and relax you. And it's also contagious. Be grateful. Taking time to appreciate what you have will help you feel optimistic. And finally, practice altruism by offering someone a compliment or donating to a charity. But at the college, the bunnies proved that all it took was one hop, flop ear, and nibble to warm a heart on this frigid day. For Bridge City News, I'm Jeanette Roche.
A coroner's inquest into the mass killing on a Saskatchewan First Nation has begun. RCMP officers who responded to a stabbing rampage were to present evidence. Miles Sanderson killed 11 people and injured 17 others on the James Smith Cree Nation and in the nearby village of Weldon on September 4th of 2022. Sanderson, who was 32, later died in police custody a few days later. The inquest is to look into the events which led up to the killings, who died, and when and where each person was killed. A new division has been created in Ontario to ensure the safety and dignity of long-term care residents. Officials say $72.3 million in funding is going to support a new long-term home investigations unit.
We're building 58,000 new and upgraded spaces over the next few years. We're making major investments to hire and retain more staff. We're ensuring that more residents have ready access to more convenient care and diagnostic services in their home, the right care in the right place. And finally, we're making changes to increase accountability, enforcement, and transparency. So that final point is the reason that we're here today. I'm pleased to announce that our government has launched a new long-term care investigations unit that is now fully trained and in the field all across the province.
You know, a housing shortage is not just affecting us here in the West, but also out east in the Maritimes. Federal Housing Minister Sean Fraser met with his Atlantic counterparts on Monday to discuss the housing challenges in Eastern Canada. There was talk of introducing more modular homes to help ease the housing supply crisis. Minister Fraser says addressing those who are homeless is a top priority.
It would be a moral failure to accept that homelessness and chronic homelessness has to be part of life in Atlantic Canada or any part of the country. I will not feel like I've solved Canada's national housing crisis until everyone in Canada has a roof over their head. Stopping short of that would be to admit failure from the outset, in my opinion. Before I address how today's conversations is going to help, let me just say that the federal government's perspective is that we want to be a good partner, but we also realize that delivery in specific communities is going to be best done by local levels of government, whether that's provincial governments or municipalities who are closer to the ground. They're going to be able to better tailor the unique solutions that fit their own community.
Now 100 days old, the latest Israel and Hamas war is by far the longest and most destructive conflict between the two bitter enemies. Reporter Joe Fetterman from the Associated Press looked at the impact of the conflict on Israel, Palestinians, and the wider region. He says neither Israel nor the Palestinians in Gaza will ever be the same.
But there are a few things that we've learned so far, a few takeaways. Number one, Israel will never be the same. Israel is in a never-ending loop, repeating October 7th. It is all that people talk about here. This is an attack that has struck at Israel's psyche. It is something that people will remember for years to come. It is an attack that shattered the country's sense of safety, the sense of security, and the sense of trust in the country's leaders, both political and military. Number two, Gaza will never be the same. Gaza has never experienced destruction like what it's seeing right now. Already, roughly 1% of the territory's population has been killed in the fighting. Thousands of people are missing. Tens of thousands of people are wounded. There is widespread hunger. The UN estimates that about a quarter of the territory's people are going hungry. Something like 80 to 90% of the population have been displaced from their homes. Tens of thousands of people are just living in tent camps in cold, rainy winter weather. And there's no hope. There's no signs of when people might be able to return home or what they'll even return to.
An Israeli blockade set up back in 2007 was supposed to keep weapons out of the Gaza Strip. The appearance of small drones, Chinese-made rocket launcher parts, and other items in the Hamas arsenal shows that the embargo has not worked.
We shouldn't be surprised that Hamas is heavily armed. We know they have significant domestic caches and stockpiles. We know they have a significant manufacturing capability, and we know that weapons have been smuggled into Gaza.
I'd stake my reputation on they're not doing it there. I would be dumbfounded. You're going to have to be a rock star at machine shop work. And I didn't see any of that. I think these folks are just trying to cover their tracks.
Wow. Samaritan's Purse has been doing its part to help lift the spirits of the Israeli people. The Christian organization recently airlifted and distributed 24,000 boxes of gifts for boys and girls in Israel. We have more now in this report.
And today I'm in Muhavim, Israel. We brought 24,000 gifts into the country, and we're distributing them primarily in 2 of these regional council areas. We want to help the children and bring some joy. We want the children to know that God loves them. So thank you to all the community and to all the people that help us. I think there is now a connection between the communities, not only the boxes, not only the donation, this is connection between people. So thank you a lot for everything that you do for our council. Thank you.
Wonderful to see, isn't it? Also wonderful to see some sunshine today and the mercury slowly climbing. That extreme cold warning continued for our region today, but there is a warming trend on the way. Complete weather details are coming up. You know, between Tuesday and Thursday of last week, the folks with the AMA say they received more than 10,000 requests for roadside assistance. And that number continues to climb thanks to the polar vortex, which has gripped much of the province. Jeanette Rocher is now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, fortunately, a warming trend is on the way for us here in southwestern Alberta.
Yeah, and if you ask me, it's not coming as soon enough, Hal. But we are finally going to get into some more seasonal temperatures beginning Tuesday, -9. So that's not too bad. We are also expecting some periods of snow, and that should last right through Wednesday evening. Wednesday's high back to -18. We're going to dip down to -22 on Thursday, -11 for a high on Friday with mainly sunny skies. And then look at that. A nice present for the weekend. 6 degrees and 5 degrees respectively on Saturday and Sunday to round out that 70 forecast. So that should really bring some happiness to that Monday, the blue Monday that we're experiencing today. So average high for this time of year -2, average low -14. 14 was our high temperature on this day back in 1942. And in 1950, we're looking at a frigid -41. That was the record low. 8:23, that's when the sun rose this morning. Sunset this afternoon, 4:59 p.m. Also bringing some happiness to the Blue Monday because we're almost at a 5 o'clock sunset now. That means days are longer, 8 hours, 36 minutes of daylight now. That definitely makes me happy. On the West Coast, expecting a high of 1 in Victoria, 0 for a high tomorrow in Vancouver. However, there is a Pacific low pressure system creeping onto the south coast there from the west, and it should bring a blast of snow with it to parts of British Columbia tomorrow. Extreme cold was still looking at Alberta was still under that extreme cold warning today. -16 for a high in Edmonton and -7 in Calgary. Both of those cities also looking at periods of snow. As we look into Saskatchewan, also under those extreme cold warnings lasting into tomorrow. -23 rather for a high in Saskatchewan. -20 is the expected daytime high in Regina. However, both of those cities still looking at extreme wind chill, looking at -40s, particularly in the morning. -17 for a high in Winnipeg. Winnipeg seeing periods of snow. 2 centimeters of snow expected tomorrow in Toronto, high of -7, -6 for a high in Ottawa, expecting flurries to develop tomorrow. 5 centimeters of snow expected tomorrow in Montreal with a high of -7. As we look into New Brunswick, New Brunswick is under a snowfall warning, particularly in the northern and central portions of the province, looking at 15 to 25 centimeters overnight, beginning tonight and should last into midweek. -2 for a high in Fredericton, though, also looking at more like 5 centimeters of snow in the city tomorrow. Halifax expecting some flurries tomorrow, 0 for a high. Snowfall expected in Charlottetown tomorrow, -1 for a high and -3 expected in St. John's. Clear skies tomorrow, but by tomorrow night, looking at a blast of wintry weather, expecting snowfall to last Tuesday night right through midweek. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
The Canadian Real Estate Association says home sales rose in December as the average price of a house sold also climbed compared with a year earlier. December home sales were up 3.7% from the same month in 2022. That marks the largest year-over-year gain since August. The actual national average price of a home sold in December was $657,145. That is up 5.1% from December of 2022. CREA says the real test of the market's resilience will be in the spring when the Bank of Canada is expected to start cutting its key interest rate. Stats Canada says manufacturing sales rose 1.2% to $71.7 billion in November. The agency says the rise was helped by gains in the primary metals and machinery groups, along with higher sales in the chemical subsector. In a separate report, Stats Canada says wholesale sales grew 0.9% to $82.5 billion in November. That does, however, exclude petroleum, petroleum products, and other hydrocarbons. It also excludes oilseed and grain sales. Well, the markets were closed today in the United States in remembrance of Martin Luther King Day. But recapping one of our top stories, a spokesperson for the Alberta Electric Systems Operator says consumers responded right away when an emergency alert was issued Saturday night, urging people to conserve power. Leaf Solid says consumption dropped by 100 megawatts within seconds of people receiving the alerts on their phones, and demand declined another 100 megawatts within a few more minutes. The alert warned that rotating outages would be needed if folks didn't reduce consumption. A large terrorist campaign allegedly organized by Hamas that was going to target large cities in North America, Europe, and Asia was thwarted. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari will have details for us momentarily. She'll also have more of the farmer protests taking place in Germany. When you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. And if you missed any of our local stories, check out our website, bridgecitynews.ca.
Here's today's Bridge City News community calendar. All are welcome to come and celebrate Malanka, Ukrainian New Year celebration on Saturday, January 20th at the Agri-Food Hub and Trade Center. Enjoy an evening of Ukrainian culture with performances by the Troyanda Ukrainian Dance Club, plus a traditional dinner and dance with live music by the Ukrainian band Absolute. All are invited to participate in the evening silent auction, 50/50 cash draw, and other fun activities. Doors open at 4:30 p.m. Tickets on sale now at troyanda.ca until January 17th. Do you have a heart to serve our community? The Lethbridge Soup Kitchen is looking for volunteers to help prepare, serve, and clean up after meals that are given every day. The Lethbridge Soup Kitchen's mission is to help alleviate the struggle of poverty for individuals and families who are poor, have very limited income, or just in need of a hot meal. They also desire to increase public awareness of the needs of the poor and homeless in Lethbridge. For information and to volunteer, visit lethbridgesoupkitchen.ca. And that's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar.
The Israeli government uncovered a very complex Hamas terror operation in Europe. Now, to chat about this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, who joins us from the foreign desk in Los Angeles. Lisa, reports from the Israel intelligence agency Mossad and Israeli Defense Forces revealed that Hamas was acting to expand its violent activity to attack innocent civilians around the world?
Yeah, no surprise here that they have had, ample time to spread their message, many years on working on this and spreading their jihadi message all throughout the world on every continent. We have seen several plots that have been foiled throughout Europe, in Africa, and of course, we're very worried that that would happen here in the United States as well. Already, we have seen some attempts. Low-hanging fruit, of course, these are one-offs and lone wolves, and we can call them, all these different phrasings that we have for our counterterrorism operations here. But the point is that they want to attack around the world, and that is a very alarming message for most. I should say all countries around the world that are watching out for this, that know that they have a threat, that know they have populations inside the country that would carry out these types of events, and of course, getting help from the Israeli government to foil these plots. Of course, Israel is keeping an eye on these threats 24/7. They have to because where there's a will, there's a way, and these terrorists do get through. And until the Iran regime is in power and funding these plots, they will continue, and the threat will continue to be there.
Now, the chairman of Hamas's political bureau called on Muslims around the world to build on the victory of October the 7th and to engage financial jihad. How would that look, Lisa? How would that actually work?
It's horrific because we've heard these threats, right? Throughout the years. We've heard many of these threats from Hezbollah, from Hamas, from Iran's regime, from Al Qaeda, from ISIS, etc. But now it's as if, the useful idiots and ignorant people around the world have become, partner and in cahoots with these terrorists. So when we hear these threats, we actually are alarmed because they do have partners in crime here, and that's why we see so much of the boycotting. We see the protests here in Los Angeles. We've seen them in New York. We see them in Chicago. We see them in Toronto, where they're actually out on the streets praising October 7th, praising Hamas, praising Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda, and anything that goes against Canada, the United States, Europe. Why are you living in these free and democratic places if that is how you feel? Go to Iran's regime, go to Gaza, go to the West Bank, go to where they will embrace you and your jihadism. And that is why it is so alarming to see so much of this sentiment, whether it's on college campuses, in Congress here in the United States. We see some of this sentiment, of course, on social media, where so many of these cowards can hide and tweet and say whatever they want. But of course, a wake-up call to all of us.
So I guess a lot of people are sending money then to support a lot of these protesters.
Both sending money, of course, funding in the sense of raising money and putting money and efforts towards this. They are looking for recruits. Remember, there's always been this race to get recruits out in the West by ISIS and Al Qaeda and Hamas and Hezbollah, always in competition with one another to get recruits. And of course, in boycotting, meaning if you're against Israel, if you're against the United States, if you're against companies that are actually friendly towards Israel and the United States, they want you to boycott those companies as well. Right now, circulating on social media are competing lists of companies that the jihadists want you to boycott because they are taking sides with the hostages. God forbid they should call for innocent hostages to be released. That they're showing sympathy for October 7th. Boycotting actors and actresses and influencers and soccer players and makeup companies and coffee companies and other things like that. So they actually want to make this a global movement to show their solidarity with Hamas, with going against, of course, Israel, the United States, anyone who sides with Israel, the aftermath of October 7th.
Now let's talk about that Israeli soccer player who was arrested in Turkey for honoring the hostages being held by Hamas. After he scored a goal, he apparently held up his hand that was bandaged. I saw the video of that, and with a very supportive message inscribed on it to release the hostages.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling to think that no one everyone in the world should be supporting this idea of releasing the hostages, including Palestinians. If you care about the Gazans, if you want a ceasefire, if you want an end to all of this, why wouldn't you call for the release of innocent hostages? There are babies being held by Hamas. There are young women who have been raped, who have had the most horrific experience. Old men. I have interviewed the family of one of those old men who turned 85 in captivity. Uh, it's horrific to think that you're not allowed to support the idea of innocent hostages being released by a terror organization. And this player used the opportunity as the 100th day of their captivity, held up his hand in solidarity where he had written that, and of course got kicked off the team, has been arrested, and is now being interrogated by Turkish officials.
Unbelievable. Lisa, lawyers for Israel presented their case of South Africa's claim that Israel is guilty of genocide in Gaza at the International Court of Justice. Now, the defense team says it is a grossly distorted story and that Israel is the real genocide victim here, following the murder of more than 1,200 people in southern Israel on October the 7th.
This is the same group of people. It's funny that they even have the word justice in the title of their acronymed organization, but the same group that refused to watch the footage from October 7th, meaning they're denying that it even happened. If you're not willing to watch the evidence, then you're just denying that it happened. This is connected to the United Nations that has given the Iran regime honorary positions on women's rights committees and human rights committees, and now they want to school Israel on genocide. Genocide against Hamas, an actual terror organization that has genocide in its charter. And when they were questioned as to why they're not bringing Hamas to this court of justice, they said, well, Hamas is not a state. We can't really bring them. So now the burden falls on Israel. Israel is being called to the court of justice. And I hate to keep saying that and giving them that kind of clout, because they're defending themselves, because they have the audacity to want to fight off an existential threat. It's truly mind-boggling, so much hypocrisy, and really it's so damaging to the actual genocides that have occurred on the global stage, that continue to occur on the global stage, and that have there is no attention paid to them. There is no justice that is brought about, and no one talks about them. So it seems as though the world is obsessed and consumed by the idea of fighting Israel, fighting Zionism in whatever capacity they can.
Lisa, the Houthi rebels threatened a strong and effective response after the U.S. military carried out another strike in Yemen overnight. Now, many feel this is further ratcheting up tensions as Washington has vowed to protect shipping from attacks by the Iran-aligned movement.
Yeah, this is continuing to escalate, something that, of course, the Biden administration does not want. Of course, nobody wants to be dragged into another war, a war that looks like it would be called World War III. And many people are asking me, is that where this is headed? A lot of things to connect here. Of course, as much as the White House wants to keep this separate from what is going on in Israel, unfortunately, we cannot do that. This is being all orchestrated by the same puppeteer, Iran's regime that is pushing the buttons, whether it's by Hezbollah in southern Lebanon that is firing into northern Israel, whether it's Hamas or Palestinian Islamic Jihad that the Iran regime continues to support to fire into Israel, to keep those hostages, to continue its reign of terror, or the Houthis, which are it's Iran's proxy inside Yemen that has been fighting Saudi Arabia as a proxy, that has been fighting and firing at ships coming through, whether they're from the United States or not, by the way. And we see that has taken a toll on global trade and ships passing through that region as well. So this will continue to escalate. And in terms of timing, Iran's regime, of course, knows the Biden administration, which spent 3 years whining and dining and coddling Iran's regime, begging for a deal, has 1 more year in office, and they don't take them seriously. They know that they are averse to any confrontation, to any escalation, and of course, they would love to use diplomacy as any means possible to get rid of this pesky little mosquito called Iran's regime. Look, the United States has no choice but to fire back right now, but they're trying to do it in a very targeted way that, again, de-escalates the situation and not to cause further escalation. Iran's regime, on the other hand, has a very different idea, I think, different plan going forward, and that's why we're really on their time. We are watching their plot unfold and we're watching the United States react to their plan.
Search and rescue operations are underway to find a couple of U.S. Navy sailors who disappeared off the coast of Somalia. They were first reported missing on Thursday night while conducting operations off the coast of Somalia. Lisa?
Yeah, very, very unfortunate. Of course, rescue teams are out there. We don't know anything more than that. They do not want to release information about their names or any specific characteristics because of that security threat. But they are still missing as of this morning. And again, rescue teams out there, but we do not have further detail. We know that they were out there on a research and intel assignment, and that is when they went missing.
You know, we've seen the protests in Germany recently with farmers bringing their tractors and other heavy equipment, blocking major roadways, protesting the German government, suspending subsidies for agricultural producers. Where do we stand right now in that situation?
This is a very interesting situation to watch. We saw this in the Netherlands as well. They were actually more successful than the German farmers will be, unfortunately. As of this morning, 10,000 farmers hit these protests, coming out with their tractors in protest, as you said, cut subsidies, had to do more with diesel tax than anything else. And the government came out this morning and said, "We support you. We want to show you respect going forward, but we're telling you right now, we've got no money." So they basically said, "Sorry, we can't do anything about it, but we want to respect you and your position." Obviously, it's all about the money. It's about the economy. It's about the farmers being able to sustain themselves. So I don't think this very kind, "Sorry, we can't," will go far with the farmers, but we shall see what will happen. But as of right now, the government let them down easy and let them know that they have no wiggle room to take back those or to provide those subsidies once again.
And I was reading some of the signs in German that said specifically, remember, we bring the food to your table. So, I mean, that's pretty important, absolutely. Lisa, Texas has been busing migrants crossing the border into the state to sanctuary cities for a while now. Thousands have been taken out of Texas and bused to cities like Chicago, New York. Since April of 2022, more than 100,000 foreign nationals who have illegally crossed the border have been bussed out. And now New York City Mayor Eric Adams says, hey, we're declaring a state of emergency. We can't handle the influx of these 37,000 who've been sent to the Big Apple here.
Right. It's interesting to watch this really unfold because, as we all know, it wasn't a humanitarian cause to take in all of these migrants that the country cannot absorb, letting them sleep on the streets, letting them get sick or bring in disease, letting them get raped, letting them drown, all of these things that these poor migrants have to go through, and then putting the burden on American cities to absorb them. Well, states like Texas said, we're not a sanctuary state, but if you are a sanctuary state and you are, so proud of your position on immigration, we will give these migrants to you. And that's exactly how it went down. And that's why you're seeing such a change of heart in these major cities that wanted to be sanctuary cities, but now see that they just cannot absorb the sheer numbers. You're looking at places like Los Angeles, like Chicago, like New York, getting the majority of these migrants and not being able to house them. So, we're seeing a lot of displacement. We're seeing a lot of homelessness that is increasing. And again, not a problem that we want to add to. And it looks like we will have to have a reevaluation, especially with the sanctuary cities. But the blue cities have to understand that it's one thing to want to do something; it's one thing to actually apply those practices in reality, and to watch these human lives that will either be displaced, be affected by it, be affected by the crime, be affected by the poverty, the pollution, everything else, and of course the migrants themselves. This is not a humanitarian act, and of course we're seeing it in real time unfold in our country.
Let's talk about the red team for just a moment here and the potential GOP candidate, Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley, Donald Trump, of course. Who's the front runner right now, Lisa? What are your thoughts?
It's still Donald Trump. It's still Donald Trump. It's interesting. We're starting our primaries here in the United States, and a lot of Republicans are anything but Donald Trump, and a lot of Republicans are not. They won't even look at the other candidates, and it's only Donald Trump. Nikki Haley has made a thrust forward. Ron DeSantis, many people thought he would do much better than he has been doing, but a lot of people that I speak to think he is the best alternative because he does bring a lot of the policies and a lot of that non-political class approach that Donald Trump offers, but with a fresh start. He's done well for Florida. They believe he could do well for the country, and others believe that he just didn't bring the charisma that they thought he would bring. Yeah, Nikki Haley being, of course, a woman, a migrant or immigrant family, I should say, an American dream story, and of course, a woman. She's done very well at the UN. She's done well in her speaking engagements, but people feel that she would be actually a wonderful running mate with Donald Trump. Others feel that she would do well on her own. A lot of center and left of center Democrats that are turning on the Democrat Party are actually turning to Nikki Haley. I've interviewed a handful of them this week in Los Angeles, actually. A lot of donors that actually were donating to the Biden campaign have now turned and are focusing on Nikki Haley as a great choice. So we shall see. It will get very interesting, Hal, and I know we'll continue to talk about it as we go forward.
Political reporter and foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari, thanks so much for joining us today from Los Angeles.
Of course.
Part of the Christian faith is an understanding that God has instructed his followers to share the gospel with others in order to evangelize. Many would argue, however, that it's easier said than done. Joining us today to discuss evangelism in the 21st century is Abe Locke, a retired pastor here in Lethbridge. Abe, welcome back to Bridge City News.
Thank you very much. It's been a while.
Yeah. So why does it seem so difficult for many Christians to share their beliefs with others? Is it maybe our own insecurities?
Well, I have to think of what is the meaning of evangelism. First of all, you see, many of us are confused with the term evangelism, and that's why we don't evangelize. We have evangelists in the past, people like Billy Graham, Billy Sunday, the Cetera twins, and the list goes on and on. All the time. These are people that have been specifically called to do evangelism as a full-time thing. But what you're talking about is for us as individual believers to be a so-called evangelists, but we will never be the professional evangelists, and that scares us. And we say, well, I can't do it. These guys have it. They know how to do it. They know their Bible and all the rest of that stuff. And so you're right. We live in fear of sharing because we compare ourselves to these evangelists. God hasn't called us all to be that kind of an evangelist. He wants us to evangelize who we are, where we are, in our circumstances, within the group of people that we live. And I think that makes a big difference to how people respond to the term evangelism.
Now, do we tend to think that our neighbors and coworkers are probably not interested in knowing or hearing about Jesus and his saving grace?
I think we think about that a lot, and that means that we haven't developed a proper relationship with them. If we get a relationship with them on a very comfortable one-to-one basis, so we can begin to talk about anything, then we can also talk about Jesus and about what he means and about our belief system. I often think that we're concerned because we don't know the Bible well enough, and that's very true. But you know, I've discovered one of the things that is most effective in my life as an evangelist, or as somebody who is evangelizing, is the fact that if I share what God has done for me, it's very hard for people to argue with that. It's very hard for them to be put aside by that because it's my experience. And when people share their experience, others tend to listen and pay attention.
So, Abe, what do you say to someone who thinks that they need to have all of the right answers before sharing about Jesus? Is it that we have to know our Bible, so all of the answers are right in there?
I think one of the problems is that we don't know our Bible. We maybe attend church once a week, and that's the extent of our Bible study. I teach a Bible study every week, and I kind of give homework and reading for the people because this is an ongoing thing. I cannot expect to talk about farming if I know nothing about farming. I can't expect to to be a teacher if I know nothing about how to relate and how to communicate and how to teach. And I think that's one of the big things. We're not sure of what we know. But secondly, I don't think many of us as Christians are sure of what we believe. I have said to my Bible study group, for example, you should work at getting up one sentence to explain your faith. For example, I go back to Paul. What did Paul say? Paul said, we preach Christ crucified, hung on the cross, died, rose again, and is at the right hand of the Father, interceding for us. You've got it in a nutshell. So learn a couple of thoughts like that you can approach a person with, and you'll feel much more secure, and they will know you believe what you're saying.
How about approaching a conversation with a stranger and planting a seed for Christ? How do you really approach that?
Well, I used to, when I was a teacher back then, I used to go golfing every once in a while. And I would go alone deliberately so that they would pair me up with 2 or 3 other people on the course in order to have a group out there. And I loved that because as we got to go, we would just chatter, and I would eventually ask them what they did for a living and how they could be on the golf course in the middle of the day or whatever. And they would share with me, and invariably, they would feel the pressure to ask me what I did. And I would say, well, I'm a salesman. Oh, what in the world do you sell? And I said, well, I sell the good news, and I sell something that's very special to me. And then I would begin to tell them what the good news is. Would be a natural in for me just to discuss it with them. And sometimes they would simply say to me, I don't want to hear another word. And I would say, well, that's fine. But I just needed to tell you what my belief system is, because we all have one.
Now, what do you say to somebody who tells you, you know what, Abe, I really don't believe in sin?
Yeah, well, I would quote some scripture to them. That's one way. But secondly, I met up with people like this at the university. And I would say, okay, if you don't let me talk about the Bible, that's my basis. And so I'm sorry, we really don't have a baseline to communicate. I said, if you want me to listen to some of the things that you believe in, I'm prepared to do that. However, I expect you then also to respect my belief system so we can have a discussion.
You know, I once had a conversation with someone who didn't know Jesus, and this person said to me that she didn't believe that Jesus was the only way to our Heavenly Father. She says, you know what, as long as we're good people, God loves us all, we'll end up in heaven. But Abe, it even says right in the Bible, no one comes to the Father except through Christ.
That's right. I had a fellow that said to me, well, Mr. Block, I think as long as you're on the bus, you're okay. It doesn't matter which bus you take. And I said, well, would that be good for you to get on any bus if you want to go to California, but it's going up to the Yukon? Well, he said, no, that wouldn't work. And I said, well, it's the same way here. You got to get on the right bus to get to the right destination, or you won't get there.
What are some of the benefits of asking good questions in a conversation with a non-believer?
Very crucial. And I think for me, the key is to build a relationship. If you don't have a relationship, it's like coming in a fog. I mean, the fellow doesn't know where you're coming from, or the person. If you have a little bit of a relationship, at least already, you build up a trust factor. And as you build up a trust factor, they will feel badly if they shut you out. They will let you say a few things at least. And I think it's very crucial to build up a trust factor. I was chairman, for example, of the condo association that we are here. So one of the things I tried to do was let the people know, I love to fix things. If you need help, call me. And that was the beginning of relationships where they trusted to just call me to help them, and that would lead to something else.
Do we, as church-going Christians, perhaps maybe spend a little too much time hanging out with believers, fellow believers? I mean, if we really believe that we should be sharing the good news about Christ, then it stands to reason that we should be making more of an effort to reach out to our community, maybe even volunteer?
Absolutely. You see, the thing is with church, and a lot of people have told me, I don't need the church. I've got the Bible and that's fine. No, I'm sorry. you do need the church. The Bible says very clearly, forget not the gathering of the saints, because that's where our encouragement comes from. That's where our support comes from. However, that's not the battlefield. The church is the place where you learn, where you get encouragement, where you get built up, so that when you do meet the others, and how can you evangelize if you're not meeting with people that aren't believers? Jesus went and met with the sinners. That's where he went. And we can't evangelize unless we have sinner friends with whom we have built a relationship, with whom we can communicate, and then the support of the church and the knowledge of the Bible goes with us as we communicate with them.
Let's talk about fellowship then, about building up other believers and helping to inspire them, especially if they want to go out and evangelize, because no man or woman is an island, right? You need that love and support.
You absolutely do. And I think that God gives us occasions when people say, well, I have no opportunities to talk to non-believers. Wow. God is giving us all kinds of opportunities. We just need to realize them. The other thing I think about is my motto has been, see where God is working and then go and join him. But that takes initiative, and we need to make a decision to do that. And so as we communicate with these people, I think an understanding of where they are coming from is also important. Do I know what they've gone through? Can I relate to the specifics in their life that have been difficult? My present wife and I, we both lost our spouses many years ago. Oh. And you know, it's interesting. When you go through that, it's amazing how people that know that will come and try and communicate with you because they want that encouragement, they want that fellowship, because they know you will understand.
So reaching out to non-believers as well, is it really important to be a sounding board for someone, especially if they're hurting or maybe did lose a loved one, like you just mentioned?
Absolutely. I think, and that's another thing with evangelism. The first thing we have to do is listen. I need to know where people are coming from. I need to understand why they're talking to me the way they are. And if I don't understand that, I'm going to respond in an incorrect way and maybe give them advice that they don't need. I know, for example, I've done a lot of funerals in my life. And one of the things I have experienced from a lot of the people that have talked to me, they've come with the idea, oh, I've had all these people quote scripture to me. I don't want to hear scripture. I want fellowship. I want company. I want somebody to sit with me. I always encourage people, when you are trying to help people like that, don't go and say, give me a call if you have a need. It never works. They're not going to call you. What you do is you go. That's all. You go and knock on the door and bring some food, or you go and you sit with them and cry with them. You just go, because they're going to not respond. And so I think it behooves us to make the move. And you know what? For somebody like me, who is an assertive personality, that's easier than for somebody who's very shy, very inverted and stuff like that. So I don't say it's easy. I just think these are things that we can all work at within how God has created us.
So Abe, what would you list as maybe the top 3 do's and don'ts when it comes to evangelism?
Don't preach. They don't want to hear that. Listen very carefully. And thirdly, share your testimony, which is not a threat. Quoting Bible, and you'll get to that point. You need to. But we often say, well, all you have to do is live a life. That's very important, because you will be the only Bible they will ever read. But eventually, you're going to have to share the gospel with words as well. They go together.
Do you think tracts are still an effective tool for evangelism?
It depends on the area of the world. I know that in some areas of the world, I have heard people are still using tracts. Matter of fact, in some areas, you have these big evangelism meetings still happening. In North America, that's not happening very much anymore, but in other parts of the world, it is. And if it's an appropriate tract, I think it can be very effective. For example, well, they used to be called the Gideons. They're not that anymore. But I know that they have found new ways. They have a magazine now that they put out. Well, people see the magazine and they take it and they read it because there's a lot of good stuff in there. But it's not a tract, it's a magazine. And I know that they put out the Gospel of John, and they've got around in our area, and they put them into places that will allow them to be placed. And they're free. And it's amazing how many people will walk into a store and see something that's free and they'll grab it. And I think these kinds of things are very important to try and put places in place where people are comfortable taking it.
Let's talk about missions trips and evangelizing overseas. How important is that today in the 21st century?
Yeah, good question. It depends, I think, on how it's done. I think we have a lot of groups that go to different parts of the world, especially with young people, and they try and give them experiences and training in evangelism. I think that's an excellent way to do it. There's no better way than get your feet wet in certain areas and begin to share the gospel. I think that's very important. And so I think there are many areas in the world that are still very open to that. I'm not sure it's quite as effective in North America. We have become rather self-sufficient. We don't need God, and so I don't need you is the attitude. I can make it on my own until they have a catastrophe or an accident or an illness or something. And then all of a sudden, they might sit and listen. So if we find out those things, we can be a part of that. And that's mission work at home, and that can be mission work abroad. And we have a lot of missionaries that are still going out there and meeting people who haven't heard the gospel or don't want to hear it.
You know what I find really interesting as well? When I was a kid, I'd always hear stories about a lot of North American pastors, preachers going out to different countries in Africa to evangelize. Now those African nations are actually sending missionaries back to North America to evangelize. Because like you said, many in North America, it's all about themselves and self-centeredness and taking the focus off of God. So that's very interesting right now.
Yeah, it is. I remember watching television. There's an ad that I hate when I watch television, and it's an ad advertising things for women, facial, et cetera, and they always conclude with the comment, "And you are worth it." And I'm thinking, that's the concept that we have in our world. We're worth it. So, serve me. It's me, myself, and I. And that's contrary to where the scripture wants us to go.
Yep, you're worth it is an entirely different meaning when you talk about Jesus dying on the cross. We were definitely
absolutely
in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Retired Pastor Abe Block, thanks so much for the chat today about evangelism.
You are very welcome. It's a part of my life, and I enjoy it and love it. God bless.
God bless you as well. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. Thanks so much for watching.